Hello, friends and party people. Okay, let's do this lecture. Oh my god, my hair. So I hope e-learning's going well for all of you. It's an experience on this end. So today's lecture is pretty short. Like I said in our intro video, not covered explicitly on the AP exam, but super relevant and timely. So we're going to talk about it. We're actually going to fix an FRQ. So we are not going to have, I'm not going to have you write a formal FRQ over this because you wrote one yesterday. So yeah, let's get started. Today we're going to identify different types of human disease, risk factors for chronic disease, compare and contrast chronic and acute diseases, discuss historically significant infectious diseases, emergent infectious diseases, and future challenges for improving human health. Yeah, infectious disease. So what do we mean when we say something is infectious? And take a moment, and I wonder if you can think of two other infectious diseases other than the disease that must not be named that have been prominent in our world lately. Take a second. Maybe Ebola, HIV, SARS, MERS, swine flu, bird flu. All of those things have been emergent, or not emergent, but all of them have been prominent. Or just influenza, plain old influenza. Oh, okay, so an infectious disease is a disease caused by a pathogen. A pathogen can be a bacteria, but it can also be a virus. It can be a parasite. So it's something that gets into your body and makes an immune response. Most common infectious diseases that we learn about are AIDS, respiratory infections, and diarrheal diseases. So respiratory, those are your flus. That's your coronavirus is respiratory, and diarrheal diseases would be like your cholera and other like dysentery, other diarrheal diseases. Other common diseases are tuberculosis or TB, malaria, and childhood diseases that kids usually get like really high fevers with. Okay, acute versus chronic disease. So an acute disease rapidly impairs you. It's a rapid onset, sudden onset. And a chronic disease impairs you over a long period of time. So an example of an acute disease might be influenza, or maybe SARS would be acute disease. So those are sudden, rapid impairments. Chronic diseases would be over a long period of time. So most cancers are chronic. Also, we have like high blood pressure, heart disease, all chronic diseases. Okay, risk factors. So these vary between low and high income regions. So in your low income regions, a lot of the risk factors are tied to poverty. So this can be underweight children, poor quality drinking water, sanitation, malnutrition, all of these things that we've talked about like all year through our population and pollution units can lead to human disease. Remember, if you are drinking out of the same water that you poop in, you're going to get sick. So water, improved sanitation is super important for public health. In high income areas, your risk factors are more things that are more lifestyle. So it's tobacco use, less active lifestyle. So like you're sitting at a desk all day, poor nutrition, overeating. You can be malnourished and overweight at the same time. So that is more indicative of a high income risk factor. Okay, epidemics. So, no time like the present. An epidemic is when a pathogen causes a rapid increase in disease, and a pandemic is an epidemic over a large geographic region. So, epidemic could be like a flu epidemic in the United States. A pandemic would be like a COVID epidemic across the world. Examples of other epidemics throughout history would be plague, malaria, tuberculosis, cholera, hepatitis, diarrheal epidemics, and influenza. Got a gnat flying around here. I think he's been living in this area for a few days, and I just can't get him, but oh well. Okay, so plague, the granddaddy of all of these things. Plague is caused by a bacterium called Y. pestis, and it's carried by fleas. Here we have a plague doctor, and here we have Y. pestis that's been stained and it's under a super microscope. Plague is estimated to have killed hundreds of millions of people throughout history, so there's not just like the one time the plague came, like plague has resurged over and over and over. About 1/4 of the European population died from plague in the 1300s, so that is when your Ring Around the Rosie rhyme came to be. That's like when we talk about the plague, that's what we're talking about. So super high death rate, 1 in 4 people died, super infectious. And a big problem with the plague was how they were disposing of bodies. So when things were being set on fire, the fleas were jumping off, the rats that were carrying the fleas would run, and it would just spread even further. Malaria. So malaria is one of my personal favorites because it's super interesting. It is caused by what's called Plasmodium vivax, which is a parasite, and it's transported via mosquito. It's estimated that 350 to 500 million people contract this disease every single year, and 1 million people die from this disease every year. Malaria is tied to tropical regions. It's, like I said, spread by mosquito. The problem with malaria is as climate change occurs and you start to get warmer, more temperate regions year-round, further north and further south, you'll see that malaria zone expand. And the other issue is as it gets warmer, you'll see malaria at higher elevations. So there are going to be more people exposed to the mosquitoes that carry malaria because of climate change. Another interesting fact about malaria, so if you look at the bottom, this is a blood smear, and the purple rings here are the parasite Plasmodium vivax on a red blood cell. And something that's interesting is if you are a carrier of sickle cell anemia, so if you only have one copy of that gene, those blood cells that get infected with Plasmodium vivax will sickle. Whereas if you are like not a carrier, you just have like normal red blood cells, you get really, really sick. It's thought that people that have one copy of the sickle cell gene don't get as sick from Plasmodium vivax from malaria. And then, but the catch-22 is that if you have 2 copies of the gene, you end up with sickle cell, which is not a thing that you want. Moving on, tuberculosis. So this one is a historic one, right? It's been caused by bacteria called M. tuberculosis. It's airborne. It's spread through cough, so it's spread through droplets. It's thought that 1/3 of the world's population is infected with tuberculosis, but it can be latent. So if you've ever worked in a healthcare field, or if you've done like a CNA class, or if you volunteered at a hospital, they will have had to do a TB test on you, and that's when they take that little needle and they put the bubble underneath your skin, and then they check back 3 days later and see if the bubble's big or not. So they're trying to see if you have latent TB in your system, or if you have TB antibodies in your system. If you have an active TB infection, you get treated with a full year of antibiotics, and there's like a public health nurse who will come to your house and make sure that you take them, because we are facing antibiotic resistant strains of TB, and like we don't want to go back to a time when antibiotics didn't work, right? Because people died, Karen, right? So we want to make sure that we are completing our courses of antibiotics so those antibiotics continue to be effective. Okay, emergent infectious diseases. So These are diseases that have not been previously described or have not been common for at least 20 years. Examples would be HIV/AIDS, Ebola, mad cow, swine flu, avian flu, SARS, West Nile. COVID-19 is an emergent infectious disease. We've never seen it before. Okay, we're starting with HIV. So HIV is a human immunodeficiency virus. So HIV itself is the virus. AIDS is the syndrome. So you can be HIV positive and not be showing the signs of AIDS. So that's that distinction. HIV is spread via sexual contact and through blood transfusion. So that one, it's harder to spread, right? Because you have to be very close to someone. You can't get HIV by being sneezed on. It's only spread via sexual contact, blood transfusions. So intimate ways that is spread. Ebola, you have probably remembered an Ebola outbreak in your living memory. So the problem with Ebola is that it has a super high death rate. It's caused by the Ebola virus, and it kills a large percentage of those infected, and it kills super quickly. So it's a hemorrhagic fever, so you get a very high fever and you start bleeding. Notice this map of Africa shows like the pockets of area where Ebola outbreaks have happened. This is from 1976 to 2014. So this is not just one Ebola outbreak. This is many Ebola outbreaks all put together. So it's not all of Africa that has Ebola, right? It's just regions of Africa that have Ebola cases, okay? Mad cow disease is our next one. So this one is, it was a big deal in the United Kingdom, I want to say mid-80s. So you end up with prions that mutate into deadly pathogens and slowly damage a cow's nervous system. It can be transmitted to humans by eating infected cow flesh, okay? So it doesn't transmit cow to cow. It does transmit if you like end up eating some cow that has been infected with it. And it's a long haul disease, okay? So it can stay latent for a long time in a person. Flu, so avian and swine flu. Swine flu is Spanish, flu is H1N1. And our current flu shot has an H1N1 vaccine in it, so that's super, that's good. Bird flu is avian flu, which is H5N1, and we don't have any evolutionary history with it, so that makes it super susceptible. It makes us super susceptible to it. Influenza, this is the 2009 Swine Flu Map, H1N1. So the case count down here is not accurate, but this does show like how it spread. The current flu map, so that I pulled this morning, so you can see that we are reporting widespread flu all throughout the United States still. We are nearing the end of flu season, so hopefully this will start to become more sporadic. But it's complicated by what's called the ILI map, which is the influenza-like illness map. So this is things that are presenting like the flu that are not the flu, such as COVID-19. So notice that throughout the United States, many places are having things presenting like the flu that are not actually the flu. SARS. SARS is a pneumonia that was also caused by a coronavirus. It happened in 2003, and it originated in southern China. I believe the total deaths for SARS was, I want to say like around 700, but I cannot tell you that for sure. But it was a very scary time, and COVID-19 is related to SARS. Okay, same kind of virus. West Nile, transmitted by mosquitoes. It causes inflammation of the brain and possibly death. And yeah, that is it. So we didn't talk about Zika. We only talked a little bit about COVID-19. But I hope that gives you a little bit more of an idea of like infectious disease throughout time. I will see you tomorrow for a short video. Have a good night. Bye.